Good afternoon. At least where I am now, it's 1 o'clock. It's a little different in other time zones, but heartily welcome to everyone to this webinar, number 8 in the series on baptism in times of change. This time we will focus on new ways of practicing baptism, and we have chosen one particular practice, namely drop-in baptism, a practice that has been developed and have spread in many of the Nordic countries, and where we have had time to gather experience and also to do some research and even to publish a book on the phenomenon. And we are happy today to have 3 speakers that are all of them, as I understand, practitioners who have been working with this phenomenon, but also done researching and studying. We will have now 3 presentations. And after that, we will go into breakout rooms. And after that session, it will be possible to ask questions by using the chat function or by raising hand and asking for the word to say something. My name is Høeg. I will be sharing this session. And Jussil from Finland will be my co-chair. Hello, Jussil. And
hello, Harald and everyone.
And he will also manage the questions in the chat. So please send questions either directly to him or to everyone in the chat function. It will be nice to see your faces. So if you feel comfortable with that, please keep your cameras on during the webinar, so we don't just have all these black boxes, and that creates a sort of feeling of being together at this Nordic and international event. I will now introduce the first speaker. That is Stein Ellinggard, who is a pastor in the Church of Norway. This year, he holds a scholarship from the Norwegian Bishops' Meeting, and he's researching the phenomenon of drop-in baptism. So please, Stein, the word is yours.
Hello, everybody. I show you some slides here. Try to get a Okay. It's okay.
Now we just see a black screen here.
Okay. Just a black screen. Okay.
Maybe if you try to change the picture, we will get it.
I get that. Stop sharing and I'll try it again. Okay.
There it's okay. Yes, now we see it. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, I want to say something about drop-in baptism in Norway. At first, I want to say that I think that drop-in baptism in Norway has been a success. And not thousands have been baptized in this way, but 1 or 5 or 10 people each time. Drop-in baptism have opened a door to baptism for new groups. Not all congregations in Norway have done it yet, but the bishops and the Church Council of Norway have been inspiring them to do so. In some dioceses, they have made a kind of drop-in baptism day together with local churches. And drop-in baptism is a part of a strategy in many congregations. Colleagues of mine talks with each other and get inspired. Okay. I have been studying drop-in baptism this year. My work is based on qualitative interviews with parents who have baptized their children and adults who have been baptized in a period from 2015 till 2020. My study includes parents with children from 1 to 11 years old and adults from 25 to 75 years old. I have also interviewed pastors, church staffs, and volunteers in different dioceses. You can say I have been looking at the consumer user side of this concept and on they who have planned and implemented this practice in their local churches. The first time there was a drop-in baptism in Norway was in May 2015. In Trondheim. We wanted to do it because we saw the decline in baptism in the inner city and wanted to help young families to get their newborn child to be baptized in an easy way. But on the first drop-in baptism in our church, nobody young families came from the local community. Instead, people came from all other places in Trøndelag, and there was no babies among them. The first who were baptized was a girl 10 years old, together with her mother and her grandparents that were coming to the church. The oldest one and the last one that day was a lady, 75 years old. When I asked her, why haven't you come to the church before? Why took it so long? She said, I did not want to disturb the church. We realized then that drop-in baptism appealed to other groups than just parents with infants, such as parents with older children, students, confirmants, fathers, mothers, grandparents, and others. This made me wonder, why do they want to be baptized now and why not before? Is it because the church had made things too complicated for them? What is it with this concept, drop-in baptism, who gives people the courage to knock on the church door and want to be baptized? To answer these questions, let me give you some of the answers from my interviews. The first group I want to talk about is the parents who did not manage to fix it. They didn't manage to get the baby baptized the first 3 or 4 months after birth. Something happened. A grandfather died and the parents lost all their energy, or someone got sick and so on. Then the years went by and it became more and more complicated for them to do it because they had no contact with the local church. Some even thought that they had to do it in a regular Sunday service, and this became also a big problem. When they asked their child 4 or 5 years old, the child would suddenly not want to go to the church to be baptized together with small babies. When the church invited to drop-in baptism, this group suddenly became reminded about baptism again. It was something they should have done years ago, but they did not manage to do it. They began to talk about baptism at home, and suddenly they saw a new possibility. We can do it in a more private setting. Then the next group was parents who did not baptize their children when they were babies because they wanted the child to decide when it became old enough. When the child then one day said, I want to be baptized, they said, okay, but how shall we do it? Some then go to the local priest and ask and got it done. But many did not know any priest or had not contact with the local church. So they thought, we just wait and see what happens when the child wants to be a confirmant. Then there will be an opportunity. This group also began talking about baptism in the family when they heard about drop-in baptism. Some parents talked seriously with their child, do you really want this? And when the child said yes, they went to drop-in baptism. For both of these groups, it didn't matter where the church was located. If they had to, they could drive many miles to get it done. Both groups also talked about a special moment in the church. They were surprised how nice it was to come there and how well they were taken care of and the holy moment when the child was baptized. In this way, drop-in baptism was a reminder, and it activated something that was forgotten for a while, and it helped them to fix the baptism in a more private setting. Let me also give you some stories from the group of adults. I interviewed especially 6 men, and it's very interesting to hear the men's histories because they do not often talk about their faith. One of them was a father with 3 children. He had talked about baptism all his life, but it had been too much work and the family had take too much time of his time. On one occasion, he had talked with a local priest, but nothing happened. And he did not want to go to the church and ask, because he thought he had to go to a study group for many hours. So when he heard about drop-in baptism, his wife said to him, no, you can do it. And he was baptized in a small chapel. Only him and his family was there. And he said, this was one of my most private moments in life, just me and God, and I have longed for this all my life. Another example is about a man who told me because he was not baptized, he felt outside his own family. And if the baptism was meant to be a sign, not just for this life, but also gave a hope for the future, it was very important for him to be baptized. This story I also heard from other pastors too, fathers who suddenly felt outside their own family and wanted to be baptized. Baptism did not bring them closer to the local church, but to their family. For both these groups, baptism was a private project they did for themselves. It seems like this concept fits the men very well because it is not so complicated. They don't want any long, deep talk with the priest who would ask them about their faith. And they don't want to spend hours going to a class to learn more. It takes too much time. And they don't want it to be so officially. They want it to be a private moment. One said when he heard about drop-in baptism, suddenly I could go to the church and just do it. The church had opened up a door for me I did not see before. Before I say something more general about drop-in baptism, let me also say some few words about what the pastors and the local staffs and the volunteers were saying. The process I will call from skepticism to baptism enthusiasm. This practice has been a kind of grassroots movement in Norway. The priest heard about it from other colleagues and how it was and brought the idea to the local church. When the local staff or volunteers first heard about this concept and the name drop-in baptism, there were a little bit skepticism. But after a short while, they accepted it and say, this is a name people understand. Let's fill it with something good. There is also few theological objections about this concept. They say, this is something new, let's try it, see how it works, and then we know more, And after they had done this, they were convinced and they wanted to do it again. Drop-in baptism is a new way of working together in the local congregation with baptism. The whole staff and the volunteers cooperate in a new way. There are meetings and a lot of creativity. They are talking about everything from the liturgy to who is making coffee, how they shall meet people and take care of them. They talk about who can be a witness or a godfather or godmother and so on. This was a very good experience doing this together. One said, I started as one making coffee and ended up as a godmother. And they care for each other. This is one example. We gave everybody the opportunity to be a part of one baptism service so they could watch and take part in the holy moment and be inspired. Everybody tells me how meaningful it was. This was one of the best days I ever had in the church, one said. When I asked them about this baptism practice, is it not privatization? The answer was no, it is not, because in drop-in baptism, the congregation take the initiative. We do this together, and they who come to drop-in baptism in our church meets people from the local church. This is not private at all. And they talk about how serious people were when they came. They describe them as people who wanted to connect to the church, have a safe place in a rootless time, wanted to belong to something, and so on. And when I asked them, how do you want the church to be? They said, I want the church to be flexible. They talk about accessibility, adaptability. They want the church to include a church who is close to the people. And I asked also about the baptism, and they try to find new words to describe what's happening as identity, belonging, be visible, connect to, a new beginning, swept in God's grace. I think words who are very including and understandable. So what is it with this concept, drop-in baptism, who gives people the courage to knock on the church door and want to be baptized? I think for some of the answer, I think, is the church is inviting to a special time. The church take the initiative. And I think the simplicity is one of the keys. Because the church has teared down all the obstacles and made it simple to be baptized. And I think this combination of a good atmosphere and the moment of holiness fits people well. One said, this was a holy moment in my daily life. And I think the privacy is important. And there's one factor I think also is important, is that you can decide the distance between you and the church yourself. If you want it to be a private baptism, you can. You can leave the church and never come back again. But if you want to go deeper and closer into the congregation, it's also possible. You don't have to obligate yourself too much if you don't want to. Drop-in baptism is a personal project, and I think it is important for people today to have this kind of freedom to the church. In Norway, as in many other countries, we are moving from a traditional culture to an individual culture. Because of this, baptism of infants declines. People reflect more and ask, what is best for me and my child? They also reflect on baptism, and because there are not so much contact anymore with the church, and because the tradition don't mean so much anymore, they drop out. And when they drop out, they don't think it is a possibility later in life to be baptized. There is still so much conformity. The pictures of what baptism is in Norway is a small child with lucky people around, families, well-dressed on a sunny Sunday service. Many people today feel that they do not fit into this picture and they don't know the alternatives. If they want to be baptized, they have no pictures to identify themselves with. This is slowly changing, I see. We have many pictures of confirmants being baptized, but still we need more. We need more pictures and we need new stories. Pastors tells me that after a drop-in day, people call them and want to be baptized. Because of drop-in baptism, they have suddenly understood that it is possible to be baptized even if you are 75 years old. This is an effect of drop-in baptism. Baptism is for everybody. My studies shows me that drop-in baptism have been helping people to get it done what they have thought of for a long time. And someone asked, how long can we do this? How long will there be a kind of market for this? I don't think we have to think like this. In the future, there will be more and more unbaptized people in Norway. Drop-in baptism tells us that there is always a possibility. I see a new enthusiasm among they who works in the local congregations doing this together. Therefore, I think in the future we will see this type of baptism in different versions in all congregations in Norway. The challenge for the church, I think, is how to keep contact with these new groups after baptism so they can feel they are a part of the church their whole life. And the second is, how do we build a local congregation in the future who can welcome new ones to drop-in baptism? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Stein, for these presentations and for the challenges. If you could stop sharing the screen.
Jeg prøver nå.
We will move to the next speaker, René Høeg from Denmark, who also is a pastor. In addition to that, he is the editor of a book on drop-in baptism. We still see your screen, Stein, so
okay, there.
There we are. Okay, René, I think is not going to use share screen, so we won't have technical problems, but we hope to hear your clear voice from Denmark. Please, René Høeg.
Thank you and good afternoon. And thank you for having me here. I think it's interesting because Denmark learned from other Scandinavian countries about drop-in baptism, and it has actually spread fast here. And in the beginning, 20, 30, or even 40 people came to be baptized. But now that more and more congregations offer baptism as a drop-in, the number is falling, but still many people are using this possibility. I think it's interesting also as an answer to Tommy Kartunen in the chat, just quickly to state how most priests are meeting parents with a little baby. Because when a couple wants their child baptized, they usually contact the church, and prior to the baptism, 1 or 2 weeks before, the priest will meet with the couple and have a chat, a conversation for 1 hour or maybe 1.5, go through the creed and talking about Christianity applied on their life. And then the baptism takes place, and after that, the parents leave the church and go back to the other baptized people out there, the big congregation. And then the church has many invitations and activities that they can attend. For instance, hymns for babies, singing hymns with parents and babies, and many other activities going into children activities, and of course the church services on Sundays and during the week. And the interesting thing is that when we have the drop-in baptism, exactly the same thing is taking place. So people are coming to the church and they will have a conversation with a priest, maybe 1 hour. We are many priests usually in the churches, and we have a good and nice conversation, exactly the same practice as we do with the couples with the babies. And then the baptism takes place, and the same ritual is also taking place with the text from Matthew 28 and the creed and our Father, etc. So in many ways, the practice is the same. And also they are met with the same invitations to attend the Sunday church services and other activities in the church during the week. So from that point of view, the difference in praxis here in Denmark, at least, is not that different. Then, of course, you could say, what about the education, as Tommy Karpunen addresses? And that is a good question. I think many congregations and priests often think that we could do so much more. But in both practices with the children and babies and drop-in, it lies a lot on the individual to join the congregation and to take part in the church throughout the whole life. Some churches do have small programs, for instance, sending a book on the date of the baptism every year to the children. But mostly there is not a structured follow-up procedure, so to speak. So when we discuss the drop-in baptism, it also highlights our general praxis with baptism, and that is interesting as a individual subject, which is not the main subject today, but it's interesting that the practice is the same. And then, of course, people like us, theologians in the Lutheran churches, we need also to look at the theology behind the praxis, why we do as we do. And I think what makes the drop-in baptism legitimate is that we have one baptism, as we can read it in many of the letters to Paul's letters to the congregations. For instance, in the letter to Ephesus, chapter 4, it says that we have one. I'll read it for you here. One Lord, one faith, one baptism. So that means that no matter where it takes place, it is the same baptism. There is not a classic, fine, more qualified baptism and then a second baptism. It is the same baptism as long as we baptize in the name of the Lord and the Son and the Holy Spirit. So that is, for me and many of my colleagues, one of the arguments why we can open for this new practice in the Church of Denmark. And it's also interesting when we talk about theology to have a look at Luther, because in the Confessio Augustana, in article number 9, it is said that the baptism is important, and the acting subject in the baptism is God. Actually, there's this beautiful German word Überantwort, giving over the responsibility to God. So no matter whether it is a child or an adult, the acting subject in the baptism is God. And God gives faith in the baptism, in the sacrament. So, and that is also said in article number 13. So, what is the difference, if there is any difference, between a child baptism and an adult who come to drop in? The thing is that when parents share their reasons why they want their little baby baptized, they often state that it is a tradition. They want their child baptized because it's a tradition. We always did that in my family, they say. And it's a part of our culture. And some of them even say it's a Danish history, so that's why we do it. And that is, of course, a valid arguments or reasons to have a child baptized. And then some of them, of course, state that they see themselves as Christians and a part of the Christian values and the whole Christian gospel. And then the interesting thing is that everyone I have met, and my colleagues agree on that, is that in the drop-in baptism, all of them state that they miss a belonging. They miss belonging to a greater or bigger story or telling, to a greater community, to the congregation. So this is often an occasion that they've been waiting for, that they've been longing for it for a long time. And I have not met one single person to the drop-in who just got there as a sudden idea. It's often many, many years of thoughts and a longing to get baptized. And now, because the church invites, and now that the church takes the initiative, they go there. And we could say, but you could just call your priest and we will arrange a baptism for you. But to many people, it has a different expression, that the church opens its doors and invites to this more, as they see it, uncomplicated service. Many people who I talked to, for instance, Bende, which we've written about in our book here, said that I want to, and she was about 55, I want to get baptized because I need a concrete and solid action to underline God's love for me and my mother. And she said, I've never doubted that I'm God's child. But now that my mother died, she died recently, her mother, now that she died, I really need something concrete, the sign, as Luther talks about. I need the sign of it, that I belong, and I belong to the congregation as to my mother. And that is a general experience, not only mine, but also my colleagues, that when they grow up, they actually, in this hectic world we live in, need to belong to something that is bigger than themselves. And not all of them, but many of them somehow blame their parents that they didn't get baptized as babies. They state that they would really have loved that they did it when they were young. Apparently, it is a big step to ask for a baptism and now that the church invites, it is different, and they get it done. I've also been thinking about what about these people who were in this world for so many years without a baptism, and that is, of course, a maybe a different subject, but also interesting in this drop-in new praxis here, because people ask, I've been feeling a part of the gospel and God's congregation my whole life, so is it necessary for me to get baptized? And that is, of course, also an interesting question. And I read somewhere in one of Luther's sermons that he writes that, I will read it for you here, but it's easier. It's in Danish, so I just translate directly, bear with me. If someone can't get baptized, or it is withhold him, it doesn't mean that this person is condemned if he believes in the gospel. Because where the gospel is, baptism is also there, and that is all a Christian needs. But of course, Luther emphasizes a lot that baptism is important for your salvation, but also underlines here that people who were not baptized as a child were not out of God's love during their life, but it is a sign and a promise to the individual that God is with this person ever and ever, and that is why it makes sense to baptize also grown-ups. I don't know about the time, if I'm running out of time, but the last thing I would like to say is that I don't know if it's common, but I think you said it too, Stein, Ellinggard, that many parents in Scandinavia decide for their children that they themselves can decide whether they want to get baptized because they want them to be conscious. And I think it's also in this discussion important to underline that consciousness is not a requirement for the baptism, because it is, again, as I said, God who is the acting subject, and that is why we baptize children usually. So drop-in baptism should not take over the baby baptism, but it is fully legitimate, theological, and also during to the gospel and Luther and others to get baptized when you are an adult. Yeah. So last, as Jonas just said, this Sunday in Copenhagen, there was a drop-in baptism, and the number is falling, as I said in the beginning, because more and more churches offer this service, but it is getting implemented in our church activities, and the critical voices that were there in the beginning 5 years ago are now muted, because many of them have experienced it themselves. They've been taking part in these church services and see that it is fully valid, just on the same level as a child or baby baptism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, René Høeg, for this presentation. We will now move to our third and last speaker, this time from Finland, Jussil Laine, who is also a pastor and has been working with drop-in baptism. So please, Jussil Laine.
Yes, thank you. You got the pronunciation almost correct, and that's really nice. I'm honored to be here with you. It's after listening to the previous presentations, I was thinking that we are totally in the same boat. Too much we try to find solutions for challenges and problems and questions locally when the challenges are almost global. And I think in this Western world and Western church, we have concentrated on baptisms, mostly on the praxis, but also theology. And we also, every one of us has encountered the dropping numbers and dropping figures of the baptisms. And it's really, really important and hopefully very useful to focus on these subjects together in the Nordic contexts. And I'm really pleased to say that our first drop-in baptism took place year 2012. So maybe this is the time Finnish church has been the first. Yeah, that's really nice. We done it in Tampere, the second largest metropolitan area of Finland, and we decided to call it Aamukaste. And I've written on the presentations morning dew / baptism, Finnish playing with words. In Finnish, the word kaste means also the dew and also baptism. So it's morning dew is a really nice, beautiful Finnish word, and we decided to call it that. I think there's also the picture from the first baptism event we call Aamukaste. There's yours truly, about 9 years younger than now, and family whose baby is being baptized. We've mainly focused on baptism of children and these events, not so much adults, but listening to your presentations, I think we must also try to make something for the adults also with this method. But while we started even almost 10 years ago planning and organizing these events, as I said, we were facing dropping numbers in baptisms, and it would have been nice to think it's only because the multicultural and multi-religious families numbers growing, but also there were many families with both parents being members of the Lutheran Church and having the ability just by calling us and reserving a baptism for them, but their children didn't take their children to baptism. And we thought that we really need to know more. We really need to focus even on strategic level on baptism and concentrating on what the families wish, what they need, what they demand from the church. So we did a survey for the parents in Tampere who didn't bring their child to be baptized, even though they were, at least one of them was the member of the Lutheran Church. And it was really interesting to see the results. There were many other subjects also being considered, but the main thing was that almost 30% of the families that didn't have their children baptized were ready to reconsider their decision. So we took measures and sent them a letter and advertised the first ever Aamukaste, this baptism event in Tampere, and we got, I remember it was about 40 children who did register. They said that they would come, and then we took care of the whole thing. And also one thing was we had these good and encouraging experiences with similar events concerning weddings in the church. They were arranged in the late evenings, and they were called Høeg, the wedding night. So that's the opposite for morning dew, morning baptism. So we also try to use this kind of marketing strategies so that they would also, the name of the event would tell them something about what is being done, and the name would be something that people know and would remember. Then I will show you one video. Hopefully it works. This is from the year, even from 2013, something to get you to the atmosphere of the baptism event called Aamukaste. Now, after a few clicks, I hope you see and hear it.
Jumalan kämmenellä, ei pelkkää elintunen. Jumalan kämmenellä, ei pelkkää ihminen. Kaikille tilaa riittää, kaikille paikkoja on. Jumalan kämmenellä, ei kukaan ole turvaton. Jumala meitä kutsuu nyt suojan turvaisan. Jumala meitä kutsuu ja kantaa voimallaan. Milloinka hän hylkää, lastensa kanssa hän on. Jumalan kämmenellä, ei kukaan ole turvaton.
So that was the video. It was me playing the piano and my, at the time, 8-year-old son singing Finnish children's hymn. And now he's 16 and going to the high school, and I'm not sure if he would like to know that I played his song for you. Don't tell him, please. But now back to my PowerPoint presentation. Then some clicks. Getting back. So since then, 2012, over 400 children have been baptized in these Aamukaste events in Tampere, and it's also a big figure, because you can say it also adds up to the relation, the percent of children being baptized in the Tampere region. It's really big thing here, have been and still is. Our next event will take place in November. But then, what is Aamukaste? And I think the main idea for us is to arrange everything to suit the families, their needs, and made it as easy as possible for the families. The church does everything, all the arrangements. They just one click in our website, and then they can relax and wait for us to take care of everything. And when we get to the church, we divide them into groups. There's normally about 4 families in the church together. They know the time when they're coming, so it's not like really a drop-in baptism, but something. But I think many of the ideas and things we done here are exactly similar that we heard from Norway and Denmark. And we really try to make the atmosphere at the church nice, comfortable, and cozy. I think one concept we can use would be Danish heritage Høeg for the event, but still taking the meaning and context and message of the sacrament very seriously. And we try to maintain very high standards with the ceremony, decorations in the church, music. As you saw, there were one church musician playing the piano and other playing the violin. And also we serve coffee and Finnish cake So we arranged the whole thing, even the after party for the families. And we also have a professional photographer at the event, so they get the pictures from there and to remember the whole thing. And somehow I think we have managed to organize the thing so that the participants feel at the same time they are very individual and private when the one family at a time by the altar and the baptismal font. I'm not sure about the font, is it the real right word? Got it from Google Translate, but you know, the big bowl filled with water. So, and still very private and individual, but somehow the feeling of togetherness, the great feeling of families taking part in each other's celebration of the child, of the love, of God's love, of Christ. And also we take big effort in advertising, local newspapers, social media, and also the video from 2013 may be a bit outdated, but still. And even with these high standards in every resourcing method, how much money we use for the event, it's still much more cheaper for the church to baptize one person in this event than the normal way, the Finnish way, when the traditional way from the about 1960s or 70s, that the baptisms are being taken care of in people's homes. So I think it's really important nowadays also to talk about the resources, about what things we do cost. And this is very, very efficient and cheap, even though we can carry out very high standards. So what kind of families have we served? There have been really all kinds of families, but I could say more than normal way, there has been multicultural and multi-religious families, with one parent being Christian, the other one something else. So they said when we talked with them that it would be somehow to really be too difficult and not their way of taking the baptism to their home or joining the Sunday service for baptism. This is some kind of easier approach to baptism and the message. And then we have had families with financial troubles. They don't have the funds to carry out the whole thing, and they don't even, somehow when the tradition is somehow losing its importance, so the tradition is losing also about how the families arranged these kind of things. And also I'm really pleased that there have been many families with parents of the same sex. One female couple whose 4 children I have been baptizing in these events altogether. It's really good, so that they know it's safe. They can come there and be just who they are. They don't have to be nervous or excited about anything. And also many single parent families. You say that the families have been somehow, there have been many more families that don't fit the old definition of normal or usual kind of family. And I think this is somehow connected what we heard from Norway also, that it's somehow they feel that this is the way church can reach out to them, and they feel safe and secure, and they can still be part of the whole global universal church. And very much we baptize children who are not being baptized as infants, as 2-3 months old. I think from the 400 we baptized, about 380 have walked to be baptized, not to be carried. And I think this is one really significant observation. And also we have arranged special events for those teenagers who are getting ready for their confirmation, who has not been baptized as children. They were not offered coffee and cake like the Finnish normal way. We offered them Coca-Cola and donuts, and they and their parents and their families, they were really thrilled that the church was so modern that we offer soda and donuts. It's really, what does it tell you about how people see the church if they are so thrilled that they are receiving donuts instead of cake? And about what we've discussed, I heard from Norway and Denmark, we also have been in touch with all the families of the children who are being baptized before the real event. Some by discussion on the phone or by other social media platforms, email, and only just a few wants to meet in person. And this is also, I think, important to understand that there are many ways to interact and do the interaction before the event. We don't have to rely on just the one way, the traditional way, that when the pastor goes to their home and they think they have to offer some coffee and be somehow, then the church tradition feels to them much more important than what's being discussed, and that's not what we are trying to reach. So I think we must offer also many multiple ways of communicating with the families about baptism, also in normal or regular baptisms, not just these drop-in events. And all the paperwork is done before the actual event. In Finnish church, there is lots of paperwork, and we don't like it. But we want to also feel relaxed, and families feel relaxed when we are done it before the actual event. But now to the conclusion, what have we learned during these years and these events? Families are really diverse. They are much more diverse than we even could think. And that's why they need multiple options and possibilities and ways of communicating to have their children baptized. And we must remember in every kind of activity we do in the churches that choosing to bring children or young people or adults, if they want to come to baptism, we must make it really possible and easy for them. Remember that the old way, when only infants were being baptized and almost every infant was being baptized, that's history. Some nice history, but gone. Hopefully not forgotten, but also we must really understand that, as we heard from Norway, I remember it was from Norway, that every picture on our website about baptism, there can't be just 2-month-old babies. There has to be persons from different ages, different cultural backgrounds, and adults, also to bring in the diversity, to also that they recognize the diversity, so the church must also recognize it in every possible way. And maybe the biggest and maybe the hardest question, or what we've learned, is that tradition is still the main thing that brings the families to have their children baptized, but it's really losing its significance in carrying the holy message and meaning of the sacrament. Doing things like they've been done in the past isn't automatically the way to secure the future, the transferring the faith to the next generations. New ways must be found. And when we focused in Tampere and also the whole Finnish church on baptism and all that, started our whole process when we are now trying to find the ways to communicate and be in touch and offer meaning and relation to the next generations, the Y and the Z generations, who are very much different from us. And I think we just can't focus on baptism, but what we've learned from these encounters, we can bring to the next stage in building the church for the next generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jussil, Laine. We have had 3 very interesting presentations from Norway, Denmark, and Finland. And I would invite members of our research team from the countries which are not yet covered to give a short comment on what about drop-in baptism in Sweden and Iceland. Karin Tillberg from Sweden, do you want to start?
Yes, I can say something. It was really interesting to listen to the talks just given, and it's quite similar, the situation in Sweden, specifically to the description we found from Norway. Drop-in baptisms have become quite popular in the Church of Sweden. It started in 2011 in the Diocese of Västerås, and I would say that roughly half of the diocese in the Church of Sweden offer it in some way today. And many parishes have a similar concept when they choose a specific day when they announce that they will have drop-in baptisms. Some parishes do it together with drop-in weddings. So, for example, on Valentine's Day, they have drop-in weddings and baptisms. What they do is focusing specifically on drop-in baptisms is that the parish often arrange the cake and coffee, just like we heard now from Finland, and together have a sort of parish feast. I would say that from what I've heard people say, both ministers in the Church of Sweden performing the drop-in baptisms as well as those getting baptized, is that it becomes very meaningful. Even though maybe, especially for the ministers, maybe before they actually had a drop-in baptism, they would say that, oh, it's like an assembly line and you just baptize and baptize. But when they actually have the experience of drop-in baptisms, they say that it's very meaningful and you get to the core of what baptism means, and that those seeking out baptism in this way are also focused on getting baptized. They're not focused on presents or meeting the families or upholding some sort of tradition, but rather that they really come to church in order to be baptized, which for both those getting baptized and those working in the church becomes very meaningful. Some are drawn to it because it becomes a way to afford to getting baptized, rather than having to spend money on a big party. They're able to do it in a more simple and unpretentious way, yet still solemn and formal and festive. I think especially the presentations from both Norway and Denmark discussed the relationship to individualism and our individualistic times. And I would say that drop-in baptism can almost function as a sort of to move away from individualism and become less focused, rather than being a private party or that which is growing, especially in some dioceses in Sweden, that you have a private service on Saturday rather than baptizing in the main Sunday service. Here you have several people gathering together for drop-in baptisms and a parish feast rather than a private party. And also that we heard from Finland, single parents and are also more common among those getting baptized in this way. Yeah, I think that's a brief perspective from the Church of Sweden.
Thank you very much, Karin. That was very valuable. Now, what is happening on Iceland? Steinun Bjørnsdottir, where are you? It seems that she lost the connection. So we will not wait for her. And as far as I know, there are not much going on in Iceland regarding drop-in baptism. If not any other Icelanders would comment, for instance, Solveig Gudmundsdottir.
Yes, hello, Harald and everybody. Like you said, it's not very common here. I think I know about one congregation in Reykjavik who has done this. Maybe there are more, but we here in the countryside, we haven't been practicing this at all. But I find all those 3 lectures that were held here today very interesting, and interesting to introduce this custom to our congregation. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that comment, Solveig. Now we will move into drop-in rooms, drop-in groups, and discuss for 20 minutes, and then we will be back for the general discussion. Jonas will send us into the rooms. Our meeting. We have had a good group discussion, even if it was a little abruptly ended. But I am sure that questions came up during the discussion there, and Yuri is not back, is he? He is supposed to help me with the questions, but anyway, we will manage. Maybe I first would invite the presenters if they want to comment on each other's presentations. What did you learn about the differences between the countries? Was there anything that surprised you? Stein, do you want to start with a few comments? You have to unmute.
I think it was, thank you very much for what you presented from Denmark and Finland. It was interesting to hear about, especially about Denmark, because I heard about this, there was a kind of nearly explosion the first time there was when many people were baptized, and now you have it's coming a little bit down now, so it's not so many. I think this is maybe normally it's like also in Norway that the first time, but I think in the future maybe this is just maybe there are only 1 or 2 persons coming to the church, but I think it's important not how many, but just for the one. So I think we don't need to count how many souls been baptized, but so it's interesting to hear from Denmark, because I heard so much about this there was so many at the first time, and why this, maybe there's a difference between Norway and Denmark, and this I don't think any have experienced this in Norway. So many people. There's just 5 or 10 or maybe 15 people coming to the church. And I thought also this was interesting in Finland. I never heard about this in Tammerfors, so it was interesting to hear about this. Especially you can give this to people who they don't feel fit in the picture of how a family should be. They are maybe feel not normal in the society. They are different. So I think the church had to listen to what's going on outside the church, but the society is changing, and I think that's interesting to hear about how many were baptized in this morning baptism. It was interesting. So I think there's some difference, yes, from Norway to Finland and Denmark. And in Sweden, I think they have done it for a long time. So this is just a normal situation in the congregations. They do it. It's not so special anymore to do this. So. But if I don't know in Sweden how many adults who've been baptized. I don't know. Is there just children, or is it people, men or 30 or 40 or 50 years old coming to the baptism, or is it? I don't know if they can say something about this.
Yeah, we'll have a comment from Sweden in a while. Denmark and Finland, do you want to comment on the other presentations? Denmark has left, but it's back. René, do you have your book there, the book you edited?
Yes.
Could you show it to us?
Yes.
That's a resource for others as well. Drop in.
Yeah. Drop in, drop. Yes, it's in Danish, and it's both theological reflections and also almost a step by step how to do it, and then of course some statements from people who were baptized at a drop-in service. I think that many of the points from Sweden and well, Norway and Finland too are similar here in Denmark, that also with regard to drop-in weddings, that this whole thing about having to make a big party and so on it's a relief to many people that they can get baptized and not having to make this great and sometimes also expensive party, especially also with regard to the weddings. Yeah, and also that society is moving, and there are so many different ways of being families today. So a divorced couple, it can be difficult to join together in a church service on a Sunday. So maybe this drop-in is less. It is less formal, but still solemn, and it has a special expression. I think it's cozy, or hyggelig, as we say in Danish. And many candles and flowers and music, and they are offered champagne, and they are offered different kind of books, the Bible and hymns and stuff. But it is all arranged by the church. They just have to go in there, and they are being they are being served. And I think it does make a difference, actually.
Thank you, Jussi. You want to add something?
As I had the opportunity to comment on my presentation because I was the last in line, but thank you for the Danish thought about offering champagne. We have to take that into consideration also in Tampere. I think mainly the big question is also how much can we go towards people, all kinds of people and their needs and their life. I believe that if the church finds people more and again, then we also find God and God's kingdom. Church without the people, with only reducing numbers and going into some kind of tradition, museum of liturgy or something, then it's not church anymore. So I think what we really need to focus is the diversity of people and what they need, and I think we can find the God exactly in the same direction. And still not giving up on the gospel and Jesus.
Thank you for that comment. Karin Tillberg from Sweden wants to give a comment.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to say on another topic, in fact, I think concerning your question, Stein, I think there are more adults getting baptized through drop-in baptisms. I'm sure that some of the Swedish participants in today's webinar can answer this question better than I can. But unfortunately, we haven't gathered statistics on this. I wanted to say something about education because there was a comment in the chat about that before, and I missed saying something on that topic because that has been up for some debate in Sweden, where what happens to baptismal education in relation to drop-in baptisms, and it's every parish who advertise or market drop-in baptisms are quite keen on stressing that there's always a conversation in preparation for the drop-in baptism, even though it might occur on the same day. But there's always a conversation, and in particular with adults being baptized through drop-in baptisms, it's become an issue whether to count them as confirmed or not when they have been baptized in this way. So that is a bit of a tricky question and up for debate in the Church of Sweden, how to view the baptismal education in relation to adults and to children, and one way of viewing it is, of course, to focus on the words of Jesus, baptize them and teach them, so that the baptism comes first and then the teaching. But it's up for some debate, and it would be interesting to hear from the rest of you.
Okay, and now we will hear from the rest of you. Yuri, do we have any questions in the chat? No, we haven't.
No, we don't have, but I have a comment, if possible, at this point.
Yes,
just a short comment. I mean, it's very interesting that if we go to the New Testament, I can find a very interesting model there for drop-in baptism or even on-the-road baptism. If you think about Acts of Apostles, chapter 8, when the Ethiopian eunuch is going and reading the Hebrew Bible, and Apostle Philip meets him, and then and the Ethiopian asks look, here is water. What can stand in the way of my being baptized? And after that, the Ethiopian continues his journey, and then the Spirit of the Lord suddenly took Philip away. So it's very punctual, just on the road baptism with no specific education, no specific incorporation to the parish life, and so on. It's a missionary situation in some way. And I think that this is, of course, very different from our church tradition, but it's still there in the tribal tradition. So I think we have some maybe some inspiration of this text when we are talking about drop-in baptisms.
And maybe if we go to the practice of John the Baptist, he had an open drop-in baptism at the River of Jordan, where people came to him to be baptized. So maybe there are some scriptural evidence for this practice that we have forgotten. Yes. Okay. Please ask questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand and have the word. I would especially like to hear from those of you who have experiences from this area, who have been engaged in your congregations or your churches with drop-in baptism. Anyone? Yes, Christina Lundström.
I remember on one occasion in the church where I work now, a winter stay, and a family, a mother and her son and a friend of her son, they were on the way back from ice skating, and they saw this sign, drop-in baptism, and the mother wasn't baptized. So she decided, I want to do this. And they came up to the church, and the boys were a bit, what? She's an adult. How can you carry her and baptize her like a child? It was a very festive moment, and it was a joy, and the boys took part with pouring the water in the fountain, so on. So it can be decided in an instant. I think it's about the Ethiopian. It's the same. I want to do this now.
Thank you. Magnus Evertsson has a comment in the chat. He remarks that the eunuch uses a Greek word kolien, exactly the same as Jesus in Mark chapter 10, where children are said not to be stopped from coming to him. And he thinks it was Oscar Kullman who thought this was important when the church started baptizing infants. So if there is no hindrance, then baptism should be conducted. Anyone else? If not, I think we have learned a lot today. We have had very interesting presentations, and I think this theme is not just limited to the practice of drop-in baptism as an isolated practice. I think this is a glimpse into a new normal situation. The situation until now has been infant baptism. Parents has come to the church with their newborn children to have them baptized. Those numbers has been going down, and new ways of practicing baptism has opened up. New groups, not just infants, but children, youth, adults in all ages is coming to baptism, and the practice of drop-in baptism, I think, is a sort of beginning of also a new normal situation where churches will engage in new ways of engaging with people. So this is a really interesting theme. Thank you for showing up today. Thank you for the presentations and your comments. And the last webinar will be in this series will be on the 24th of November on baptism and eco-theology. And I will then welcome you back to that event. And thank you for being here today.